Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the webinar on conservation in Iraq, practices, challenges, and opportunities, organized by Nahrein Network, UCL, and Chatham House. I'm Hossam Mahdy. I'm a conservation architect. I'm from Egypt and Britain. I am an independent researcher and consultant on the conservation of built heritage. My interest and work is really on the issue of conservation in the Arab region and the question of the cultural aspect or the culture specific conservation attitudes. I'm interested to investigate the conservation theories from the point of view of Islamic worldview and values. And also I'm interested in the terminology of conservation in Arabic. My experience had been in the Arab region, different places. Obviously, I'm Egyptian, so much of the work had been in Egypt, in Cairo, Luxor, and Alexandria, but also, and in Sinai, but also worked in Abu Dhabi, in Iraq, Jordan, Yemen, and Oman, on both conservation, architectural conservation, and urban conservation. I had always been interested in the conservation region in different places and definitely in Iraq. Uh, I'm really honored to be chairing this webinar because Iraq and its heritage has a special place, not only for the Arabs and Muslims, but for the whole world. Its heritage merits conservation. Uh, I am really pleased to introduce two very important specialists in the field who will talk to us about the issues of conservation in Iraq. We'll start first by Giovanni Fontana Antonelli. He's a world experienced architect, urban landscape planner, and heritage expert who gained his extensive experience from serving the United Nations for more than 20 years in Africa, Europe, and the Arab region. He started his international career in 1998 as UNESCO Associate Expert in Southern Africa, which continued at the World Heritage Center for 2001 and 2002, and later on UNESCO Chief of Culture Sector in Palestine, where he served for a decade from 2003 to 2013, and in Nigeria in 2013. Between 2014 and 2019, architect Fontana Antonelli was UN Senior Consultant for several conservation and development projects in Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. In 2017, he founded Archimedia Trust, an agency specialized in cultural development, such as safeguarding tangible and intangible cultural heritage, developing skills and capacities, promoting education through arts and exhibitions, and addressing the humanitarian development link. Architect Fontana Antonelli holds a master's degree in architecture from the University of Florence, keynote speaker in numerous international conferences. He's co-editor of 3 books and author of more than 70 publications on heritage and development studies. The conservation and advocacy planning for the protection of the agricultural dry stone terraces and irrigation systems of Batir 2006 to 2014 was awarded the Millennia Mercury International Prize for the safeguarding of cultural landscapes in 2011 and substantially contributed to the description of the cultural landscape of southern Jerusalem, Batir, on the World Heritage List in 2014. He was nominated 2 times for the Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 2013 and 2016. Between August 2017 and March 2019, Giovanni Fontana Antonelli has been engaged in restoration and critical reconstruction of the old city of Mosul after the liberation from Daesh, within UNESCO's flagship initiative, Reviving the Spirit of Mosul. So I'm really honored and pleased to introduce Giovanni, and please, the floor is yours, Giovanni.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and of course, I have to thank the Nahrein network and you can hear me well, right? You can hear. Yes. I'm thanking the Nahrein network, of course, and the Chatham House, which is partnering with the network for this very interesting series of webinar. Unfortunately, we cannot be all together in the same room, meeting room today, and we'll try to do our best through the Zoom platform, to speak through the Zoom platform. I'm sure it's not the same, but I'll try my best not to be too boring for the audience. I prepared a short presentation, about 14, 15 slides, which I hope then will be followed up by a debate, an open debate with the attendees of this webinar. I use this image as the first image of the presentation because I think it encapsulates very well the situation of Iraq, of the cultural heritage of Iraq. It is a portal made of al-farish, the beautiful stone or marble stone that characterizes the northern area of Iraq, especially in Mosul Old City. Most of the palaces in Mosul and the churches and mosques are built using this stone. And this is an image I took in January 2018 in the city of Mosul. I think that this photograph can well represent the situation of the cultural heritage of Iraq today, because it shows an amazing richness and wealth in the assets that characterize the Iraqi heritage. But at the same time, it also shows critical conditions, very severe attack that this heritage is facing, and unfortunately is facing since many, many years. Repetitive attacks of different nature. I'll go later on a bit more in detail of what type of attacks this heritage is undergoing. And it also shows a position which is giving us the sense of difficulty, of instability or volatility, in which this rich heritage is now situated. We are in a position in Iraq where this wealth, this heritage, which I consider definitely a wealth for the country, also a socioeconomic wealth, is about to collapse, is on the verge of a collapse. But it is not collapsed yet. It's not totally collapsed. It has been attacked, it has been destroyed, it has been vandalized, it has been... oh, the screen is black. Someone is saying the screen is black. Like you cannot see my screen now?
No, it's clear. It's clear.
It's clear now. All right. Okay.
It's clear.
Okay. So I was saying that this image, in one word, really encapsulates all these contradictions, let's say, that are really present in Iraq right now. I will talk mostly from the recent experience I had in Mosul, but not only in Mosul. I was recently in Hatra and in other locations in Iraq. But all in all, my experience is telling me, and I hope this is conveying the message to this audience, that there is still a possibility to save, to preserve, to rescue this heritage, but there is no much time left for this operation. The next slide shows also another situation in another photograph taken in Mosul, more or less in the same period. We are in the beginning of 2018. This is the cloister of the Al-Tahira Catholic Syriac Church in the old city of Mosul. And I like to show this picture because although the decorations, decorative elements of the stone are less evident comparing to the previous picture, well, the proportions and really the harmony that is porch, this riwak in Arabic, is conveying is really extraordinary. It reminds to me the city where I studied architecture in Italy, which is Florence, which is well known to be the city of the Renaissance, of the 16th century Renaissance in Italy. Well, the proportions and the harmony of this riwak, or this porch with these columns and the arches are really suggesting to me the same feeling. But at the same time, in the same picture also, you see destruction, you see despair, you see vandalization, you know, through sprayed on walls and a total setting of destruction and despair, which is unfortunately not only affecting this church, but a wide area which spreads not only in Iraq, but also is spreading through Syria and other regions in that area of the Middle East, of the Arab region. And here it's a slide which is summarizing a number of assets that although we are in the presence of a conflict and crisis situations, heritage has always and still it plays an important role and still has a voice that should be listened to in terms of future viability and future sustainability and future prosperity, especially thinking to the local population that live in those areas. So I just quickly mentioned these 7 headings that are taken from actually a paper or a study that Mehiar and I worked on, contributed with another 2 experts, European experts, for a strategic policy paper that we prepared for the European Union a few months ago. Because cultural heritage, even in, or maybe especially in conflict and crisis areas, bears a strong symbolic and strategic significance. It is a time connector when heritage connects the conflict tensions with past and future peace and prosperity. It is the space and maybe the dimension for multi-stakeholder dialogue and negotiations. It must be seen as considered strongly as a people-centered asset. So the policies that deal with cultural heritage must always be people-centered, because if we don't put the people, the local community at the center of these policies, every action that we can undertake, every project that we are trying to implement would not be completely well received by the local communities. And also cultural heritage has a multidimensional conflict and peace variable. It is, in one word, an excellent entry point for healing from conflicts and crises. And we strongly hope that in Iraq also this might play, heritage might play this role. Few years ago, now is already 6 years passed from the takeover of Mosul by the criminal forces of Daesh or ISIS or ISIL. In July 2014, they blew up the Nabi Yunus tomb mosque, the shrine and the mosque, which was embedding and encompassing a very important significance and also spiritual symbolism, gathering the 3 monotheistic religions that are so important for the development, for the spiritual development of this area. This day, the 24th of July 2014, really marks a chapter, a very sad and negative chapter in the history of Iraq, but also marks possibly, and this is why we are gathering today and why the efforts of this community, these experts and community is gathering and is working together to make a possible rebirth for the city of Mosul and entire Iraq, which is the focus of our talk today. The challenges are so many, are extraordinarily vast. I mentioned here just a few, also taking advantage of this paper that we just wrote with Dr. Mikyar. There is in Iraq an institutional paralysis. We know very well the challenge to form new governments every time there is elections or a crisis in the political setup. There is a weak institutional capacity, and here I'm not, of course, undermining the extraordinary and the brilliant work being undertaken by the SBAH and other institutions gathered under the Ministry of Culture, but because of the situation, because of the lack of means and the lack of also of financial means and personnel, also those institutions have a very difficult task in order to fulfill the role. And then there is a legislative framework which is also not conducive. The heritage laws are not updated. There are some controversials that they are somehow these laws are competing, and there is not a clear mandate, especially when it goes to the governorate and the remote governorates that sometimes are very disconnected from the central capital, Baghdad. And especially there is an absence so far of a cohesive national strategy that really should be seen as the glue, as the cohesive element for rebuilding Iraq and also rebuilding the rich cultural heritage of Iraq. Unfortunately, these type of challenges lead to what we can call a cultural heritage erasure. In this photograph that I associated to this slide, you see one of the hundreds, really hundreds of mansions, houses, palaces, residents of the old city of Mosul, all of them built using this marble stone, al-Farish, and decorated in amazing patterns. Well, this shows that majority of these houses have been unfortunately bombed, destroyed, attacked, and it would be extremely challenging to rebuild and to reinstate this heritage as it was before the conflict. But the cultural erasure is not only related to the deliberate acts of cultural destruction and the effects of war, as Mosul, but also we are counting, unfortunately in Iraq, appropriation or illegal appropriation of heritage, neglect, which is absolutely spreaded all over the country from north to south, and also the development of related cultural heritage destruction, which is done in the name of different people, different groups, and different types of names. There is also the very vast issue or question of the illicit trafficking and looting of cultural properties in Iraq. This is unfortunately has a long history. There was a major event in 2003, the looting of the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad, that everyone remembers, I'm sure. But not only that episode, which was of course very important, paramount, but also on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, we witness, unfortunately, without many means to counter those actions, those criminal actions of looting and trafficking and illegal export of basically of the history, basically of the soul, basically of the quintessence, the real fuel and oil of the other oil of Iraq, which is its history and cultural heritage. I would like to mention here that the task is, of course, multifaceted, is multi-stakeholder, and this is why whoever we are, from independent consultants and researchers, from non-governmental organizations, from local authorities, from national authorities, the SBAH, first of all, of course, but the entire community, national and international community, should better work together through bilateral partnerships, international organization support, creating networks among local partners, involving in heritage studies and in heritage activities at the Iraqi universities that are an amazing source of knowledge and capacities that should be better invested in this sector. We know all well the situation of Department of Engineering in Iraq, which are mostly associated to new construction, while an important role should take the conservation of historic buildings or built heritage or historic buildings, also being by expanding the curricula of the studies of engineering, of architecture, archaeological studies, and history in general. Civil society also very important, because it's not only those organizations that deal with heritage that should be involved, but also other associations or organizations that, for instance, deal with socioeconomic development, education, health, and many other sectors. Last but not least, the religious endowments, the Awqaf, the three Awqaf, Shia, Shiite, Sunni, and Christian and other minorities endowments in Iraq are key, because they also they own an extraordinary number of historic buildings, mosques, churches, monasteries, temples, in the case of the Yazidis and other minorities, etc. And these are really the custodians of those buildings that should be preserved. Few years ago, in 2014 or 15, we started working on capacity building for technical staff of the Sunni endowment, especially working in Samarra. And this was an excellent experience that we should replicate, of course, also for the other endowments, and to gather all of them together for the preservation of this heritage. This is an amazing building in Baghdad. It's the Sahrawardi tomb or shrine. It's a Muqarnas dome, which has a critical situation of stability, needs urgent measures for stabilization and restoration. Just to say that it's not only the heritage affected by conflict and war that in Iraq is must be under the lens of the experts, but also of the politicians and the institutions at the national and regional and local level. What comprehensive approach now to crisis? And this crisis also how can lead in the future to peace building, and to therefore a situation where Iraqi institution could work in absence of crisis to rebuild their own country, starting from their history and their heritage. Well, here there are also a few headings, a few items that we listed in this paper: conflict prevention and peace building through cultural heritage cooperation, dialogue and mediation in crisis, crisis response and cultural heritage protection, civilians' access and transmission of intangible heritage. This is very important, how the civil society also should take part in this action. Counter-terrorism and fight against organized crime and anti-trafficking. This is a very vast area of cooperation that, of course, should involve also the Iraqi security national forces, police forces, custom, and other bodies. And then post-conflict rehabilitation interventions. For this last point, there is already, in particular for the areas affected by the conflict in the northern governorates, in the five, mainly the five northern governorate, northwestern governorates, Anbar, Diyala, Salahuddin, Nineveh. Well, in these areas, intervention already started, but in my opinion, these are drops in an ocean. These are interventions that probably will tickle the real situation of crisis in the country. So the call is to increase those interventions, to increase the coordination, and to have a more concerted approach to and holistic approach to the issue of conservation. Here, I don't want to take too much time. I just put a couple of slides about Mosul. This image talks by itself. It doesn't need to be commented too much. These are the red spots are bombs that fell on Mosul, and you see how the large majority of these bombs fell on the historic town. Fortunately, not much, just a few on the Nineveh ancient city, the archaeological site, but a large concentration of those bombs hit the historic city with the damage inflicted that I showed in a few pictures before. Leaving the city in this situation, which is basically, this is a photo taken in February 2018, also the same period I was talking before, leaving the city basically an amount of rubble or few other houses, really few houses still left in their place. I was talking about, yes, few interventions. This is the UNESCO largest intervention, the Revive the Spirit of Mosul initiative, started in 2018 and is still ongoing. I contributed to the fundraising of this initiative. Unfortunately, there is again, is my personal opinion here, a discrepancy between the funding, the amount of funding, and the real results on the ground, because here UNESCO will invest about $50 million to restore a small area in Mosul, really a compartment of a few very significant, very iconic and important historically buildings, but not solving the problem of the cultural erasure that I was mentioning before. This complexity can be addressed, in my opinion, also being an urban planner and architect by training, through a sound planning. So through a sound, holistic, comprehensive planning that should address the entire fabric or historic fabric of the affected areas. Here they are just examples of our work when we started. How the situation before destruction, after destruction, could lead to an understanding, really a detailed understanding of the urban fabric, building by building, site by site, parcel by parcel, which means owner by owner as well, by intertwining, is the next slide, intertwining the value, the historical value of this building and the damage level, the level of damage. Of course, here we're talking about Mosul, which is a city affected by war, but the same type of categorization and intervention can also apply to Baghdad or to Basra or to other historic towns in Iraq that are so many, because it's a methodology. It's a methodological work that should be disseminated, should be discussed, should be absorbed also by the technicians, the experts, and also the colleagues in the university, the academia, and to be used as a reference for future interventions. I'm about to close here the presentation. Maybe it was a bit too long even. Mehyar told me I could talk a little bit more. Okay. I just showed this slide. Sorry, my computer is a bit slow now. But yeah, we show this slide because, well, this is the follow-up of the other project and planning. Yeah, 1 minute. Okay, this slide, I put this slide, which is a bit provocative as a conclusion, but it shows how the majority of the reconstruction is undertaken using cement blocks without any, let's say, respect for the historic fabric, for the built heritage, and for the history of Iraq. So I close here my presentation and I give the floor to my colleague for his presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. That was very interesting and really thought-provoking. I'm sure there will be a lot of discussions, but I think it's a good idea to keep the discussion to the end. Sure. So yes, so I would like to introduce Dr. Ayad Hassan Abed Hamza, who is the Director General of Restoration and Engineering since 2016 of SABA, supervising restoration and rehabilitation of archaeological and heritage sites in Iraq, member of Higher Committee for Spirit of Mosul project in cooperation with EU after Daesh the destructions, supervising rehabilitation of Ashur archaeological site and restoration of Ur and Uruk Babylon sites, member of restoration of Al-Khulafa Mosque Committee, represents Iraq in the ICROM meetings in Italy and in Sharjah, head of committee for conservation plan for Babylon, which submitted to the World Heritage Center. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ayad, who will speak in Arabic and kindly will get a translation from our colleague. So please, Dr. Ayad. تفضل دكتور إياد.
دكتور رياض.
دكتور إياد.
Excuse me, Dr. Ayad is muted.
دكتور إياد, maybe
دكتور إياد.
افتح الميكروفون على اليسار أسفل الشاشة.
Okay.
Works, yeah.
Okay. Okay, تسمعني أستاذ؟
نعم واضح دكتور إياد، تفضل.
نعم أستاذ. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أهلا وسهلا. بالبداية راح نتحدث عن التحديات اللي تواجهها المعالم والمباني والمواقع الأثرية في العراق. يواجه التراث الثقافي عددا من المخاطر والتحديات التي أفرزتها الحروب والصراعات. أفرزت الحروب والصراعات الكثير منها، والتي تستوجب التوجه المباشر نحو هذا التراث وتوفير الحماية المناسبة له مع كل ما يتضمنه ذلك من آليات ووسائل وضمان الحفاظ عليه لما يشكل من أهمية للمجتمع وأهمها.
So Dr. Ayad will be talking about the challenges facing the monuments, building and archaeological sites in Iraq, And he started by the challenges facing monuments building and ecological sites in Iraq, stating that the Iraqi cultural heritage faces a number of dangers and challenges that were caused by wars and conflicts. Many of these challenges require direct attention and action, as well as providing the appropriate protection with all necessary means to ensure its preservation due to the importance to the Iraqi society. And
أهم هذه التحديات هي تحدي الحروب والصراعات المسلحة، حيث شهدت المنطقة نشوب العديد من الحروب والصراعات، وتتزايد أهمية حماية التراث الثقافي كونه أحد أهم وسائل الحفاظ على هوية شعوبها وما تحتضنه من تاريخ وتراث ثقافي وإنساني. إذ تم أثناء الحروب استخدام العديد من المواقع الأثرية والمعالم التاريخية كمأوى للمقاتلين ومخازن السلاح، مما جعلها عرضة للاستهداف.
The first of these challenges are the war and armed conflict. The region witnessed the outbreak of many wars and conflict. Therefore, the importance of protecting the cultural heritage has increased as the cultural heritage is one of the most means of preserving the identity of its people and the history and the culture of the human heritage it embraces. During the war, many archaeological sites and historical monuments were used as shelters for fighters and weapon stores, which made them vulnerable to targeting.
التحدي الثاني هو التدمير المتعمد الذي يهدف إلى تدمير تراث ثقافي بحيث ينال من سلامته ويشكل انتهاكا للقانون الدولي. وقد شهدت بعض المحافظات الشمالية والغربية الكثير من عمليات التدمير، مثال على ذلك تدمير المواقع الدينية والتاريخية في نينوى وصلاح الدين بين عامي 2014 و2015 من قبل تنظيم داعش، الذي كان له الدور الكبير في تدمير التراث الثقافي والمعالم الأثرية، حيث اعتبرت الأمم المتحدة تلك الأعمال هي انتهاك للقانون الدولي بحسب ما قرره في جلسته 7907 في 4 مارس 2017.
The second challenge is the intentional destruction. It is this type of destruction that aims to destroy a cultural heritage which constitutes a violation of international law. Some northern and western governorates in Iraq have witnessed many destruction operations, as example of which is the destruction of religious and historical sites in Nineveh and Salahuddin between 2014 and 2015 by Daesh, which had a major role in the destruction of Iraqi cultural heritage and archaeological monuments. The United Nations considered these actions as a violation of international law, according to what was approved in 2017.
الصور اللي أمامنا هي لموقع الحضر اللي يعتبر أحد مواقع التراث العالمي، تم تدميره بالكامل مع أجزاء كبيرة من عده مع معابده.
So the picture on the right, it is for Hatra, which is totally destructed by ISIS.
والصورة اللي جنبها صورة لمتحف الموصل، حتى متحف الموصل الحضاري تم تدميره بالكامل.
And the one on the left is the Mosul Museum, which is also destructed and destroyed by ISIS.
تم تدمير الأضرحة ودور العبادة، ومثال على ذلك الإمام عون الدين ويحيى بن القاسم وضريح نبي الله يونس عليه السلام، وبالإضافة إلى كنائس عديدة وجوامع عديدة، بحيث ما اتجهوا إلى طائفة معينة. كل الطوائف بالعراق تم تفجير المواقع اللي تابعة لها.
The holy shrines and religious places were no exception. They are all also destructed in many places by ISIS. Examples of such destruction is Imam Awn al-Din, Yahya bin Qasim, the shrine of the Prophet Yunus, and many churches and mosques.
الموقع اللي بعده هي مدينة آشور الأثرية، تم تدميرها تم تدمير معالم هذه المدينة بالكامل، وهي تعتبر أحد من المواقع المسجلة على لائحة التراث العالمي. طبعا هي والحضر هم يعني ما ذكرتها.
This place is for Assyria. It's one of the sites registered in the World Heritage List. It is located in Shatra district in Salahuddin Governorate. The Iraqi Ministry of Antiquities and Tourism announced at the end of March 2015 that ISIS has blown up and destroyed the site and caused the destruction. It is also is one of this Ashur, Assyria, and Hatra are registered on World Heritage, both of them.
التحدي الثالث هو التلوث البيئي. مثل ما تعرفون بأنه العديد من المعالم الأثرية والتاريخية تعد من أكثر عناصر التراث الثقافي هشاشة، وخاصة التي تكون بالقرب من المدن أو في ضواحيها القريبة، وهذا يعرضها إلى مخاطر متعددة مرتبطة بالتلوث البيئي في ظل غياب الصيانة والاهتمام.
So another challenge is the environmental pollution. Many archaeological and historical monuments are among the most fragile elements of cultural heritage, especially those near cities and nearby suburbs, and that which exposes them to multiple risks associated with environmental pollution in the absence of maintenance and attention and lack of attention.
التحدي الرابع اللي هو غياب الوعي المجتمعي بأهمية التراث الثقافي والمواقع الأثرية. عدم إدراك ضرورة الحفاظ عليها بوصفها تراثا يمثل هوية المجتمع، حيث تتعرض المدن الأثرية إلى شق شبكات طرق داخلها أو تجاوزات المزارعين من خلال استغلال مساحات للزراعة في المناطق الأثرية كما حصل في مدينة سامراء، مما يعنيه إلى إلحاق أضرار بآثار مهمة تعود إلى العصر العباسي.
Another important challenge is the absence of societal awareness of the importance of cultural heritage and the archaeological sites. The lack of awareness of the needs to preserve and protect the cultural heritage that represent the identity of the community has caused the archaeological sites to be exposed to the work of the road networks or by farmer accesses through the exploitation of areas for cultivation in archaeological areas. This has happened in such challenge or destruction happened in Samarra, which means causing damage to the important monuments that dates back to the Abbasid era.
التحدي الاقتصادي يتمثل بضعف الموارد المالية المخصصة لحماية التراث الثقافي، فضلا عن عدم وجود آليات لتوفير موارد جديدة من خلال تحديد مصادر مستحدثة وضخها بشكل عقلاني في عملية الحفاظ والصيانة والترميم وإعادة التأهيل.
The economic challenge represented by the weakness of the financial resources allocated to the protection of cultural heritage, as well as the absence of the good policies to provide new resources and pumping them rationally in the operations of preservation, maintenance, restoration, and rehabilitation.
التحدي التشريعي عدم توافق الكثير من التشريعات مع طبيعة التراث والمناطق التراثية وخصائصهما، فضلا عن عدم تفعيل بعض المواد المهمة لقانون الآثار المعتمد حاليا، والمفروض يكون هناك قانون خاص بالممتلكات الثقافية كما معمول به في بعض الدول.
The legislative challenge, much of the legislation is compatible with the nature and characteristics of heritage and heritage areas, as well as the failure to activate some important articles of the antiquities law. There should be there should be laws that is related or associated with the cultural heritage as it existed in other countries.
التوسع العمراني والسكاني، حيث أن التوسع العمراني في المناطق التي تحتوي على مراكز ثقافية يؤثر سلبا عليها ويشكل تحديا أمام الحفاظ عليها كمشاريع البنى التحتية. يعني دائما نسوي نفد مشاكل بال
the urban and population expansion, as the urban expansion in the area that contains cultural centers negatively affects them and stands as a challenge to their preservation.
المخاطر والتحديات الطبيعية اللي هي مثل الأمطار والسيول والعواصف، الرياح، الهزات الأرضية، الصواعق، التغير في درجات الحرارة، الرطوبة، نمو النباتات الطبيعية، المياه الجوفية والسطحية، تؤثر سلبا على التراث الثقافي ولا سيما الآثار التاريخية والمباني والصروح القديمة، مما يؤدي إلى تآكلها أو حتى إلى انهيارها وجرفها.
The natural hazards and challenges such as rain, terrains, storms, winds, earthquakes, thunderbolts, temperature changes, humidity, the growth of natural plants, ground and surface water, etc. All of these can negatively affect the cultural heritage, especially the historical monuments, building, and ancient cities, and ancient edifices, which leads to their erosion or even their collapse.
من هنا بس اكو مثال عندنا على خان مرجان، يعني هسه حاليا دا يتعرض الى مياه سطحيه من المباني القريبه عليه اللي هي البنك المركزي، من المباني المجاوره، حيث هو الموقع مالته اوطى من هاي المناطق، فالمياه السطحيه دائما تغمره بالمياه. حثت هسه حاليا، العفو استاذ، حاليا اكو صيانه وقائيه للتخلص من هذه المياه، لكنه نتخلص من عندها وتجينا من غير جهات، فجاي نعاني من مشاكل، جاي تصعد الرطوبه به وتاثر على الافاريز، على العقود اللي به، وعلى حتى الارضيه، فلذلك المبنى معرض للانهيار.
Okay, one of these affected buildings is the Khan Marjan, which is highly affected by the humidity. Okay, and also which is highly affected by the surrounding buildings, because the Khan Marjan is lower than the surrounding buildings, therefore it suffer from humidity. Although there are many preventive measures taken to protect this Khan, but also whenever they try to solve it from side, another problem occur in regard to the humidity.
من هنا تأتي الحاجة الملحة إلى أن تأخذ الدولة والمنظمات العربية المعنية بالتراث والمنظمات الدولية على عاتقها مسألة حماية التراث لما له من أهمية في حياة الشعوب وتاريخها، لكونه جزء من هوية هذه الشعوب، ناهيك عن أهميته المادية وما يوفره من مردود مالي عند استغلاله الأمثل في المتاحف وغيرها.
So hence the urgent need for the state of Arab organization concerned with the heritage and the international organization to take up themselves the issue of protecting it, because of it's important to people, or it's important in the people's life history, and as it is part of their identity, and not to mention that its material importance and the financial return it provides when it's optimally utilized in the museum and other things.
من هنا الهيئة العامة للآثار بدأت ببرامج ومشاريع كبرى للحماية والحفاظ والصيانة والتنمية في إطار التنمية الاقتصادية والبشرية المستدامة. هاي الأعمال حثت من 2003 لغاية 2015 بداية هجوم داعش. يعني أهم هذه المشاريع هي مشروع إحياء مركز بغداد التاريخي اللي هو تطوير شارع الرشيد بإشراف أمانة بغداد بالتنسيق مع هيئة الآثار. قدم المشروع إلى أمانة بغداد وتم المصادقة عليه في عام 2011، لكنه أوقف العمل بتاريخ 2012 لقلة التخصيصات المالية، ولحد الآن المشروع تصاميمه جاهزة وكامل بس منتظرين التنفيذ يعني.
Therefore, there have been many major programs and projects for protection, conservation, maintenance, and development within the framework of sustainable economic and human development. Some of these projects are the historic Baghdad Revival Project, Al-Rashid Street Development, which is supervised by the Baghdad municipality in coordination with the Antiquities Authority. The project was submitted to Baghdad municipality and was approved in 2011, and the plan was suspended in 2012.
برامج الخطة الاستثمارية للهيئة العامة للآثار والتراث تضمنت صيانة وترميم وإعادة مباني المدن الأثرية وأبنية تراثية منفردة أنجز منها في السنوات الماضية، وتحتاج إلى صيانات دورية مستمرة، وتعرض بعض منها إلى التدمير والتخريب.
The programs of the investment plan of the General Authority for Antiquities and Heritage included the maintenance, restoration, and rehabilitation of the buildings of ancient cities and the individual heritage buildings, which were completed in past years and they all require continuous periodic maintenance, and some of them were subjected to destruction and sabotage.
أمثلة عن مشاريع الحماية والصيانة والتأهيل. مشروع صيانة وإعادة تأهيل بيت التتنشي عام 2012، تأهيل الخانات التراثية، خان الربع في كربلاء، خان الحماد وخان الشيلان في النجف، صيانة المدرسة المستنصرية والباب الوسطاني ضمن مشاريع بغداد عاصمة الثقافة، صيانة مدينة النمرود، صيانة مدينة آشور الأثرية، مدينة الحضر الأثرية، صيانة وتأهيل طاق كسرى الأثري في المدائن.
The following are examples of protection, maintenance, and rehabilitation projects. The first one, a project for maintenance and rehabilitation of Al-Tatanchi House, the rehabilitation of the heritage khans such as Khan al-Ruba in Karbala, Khan al-Hamad, and Khan al-Shaylani in Najaf. Maintenance of the ancient al-Mustansiriya school and al-Wastani gate in Baghdad. Maintenance of the ancient city of Namrud, the ancient city of Assyria, the ancient city of Hatra. Maintenance and rehabilitation of the ancient city of Taq Qusra in al-Madain.
مثال على الصيانات، صيانة تأهيل بيت التتنشي قبل وبعد التدمير يعني.
This is an example of the Tenchi before and after, before destruction and after destruction.
أي تم هاي الصور قبل التأهيل وصور بعد التأهيل، لكنه مع الأسف تم تدميره بالكامل من قبل عصابات داعش.
These are pictures of before rehabilitation and after rehabilitation. It was restored, but unfortunately, once again, it was destructed by ISIS, completely destructed.
حاليا تم الاتفاق مع منظمة أليف، جامعة بن سلفان ضمن مجموعة منظمة أليف، جامعة بن سلفانيا بالتعاون مع جامعة الموصل وكوادرنا اللي موجودة بالموصل بتأهيل بيت التتنشي. وحاليا المراحل الأولى بدأ رفع الأنقاض والتدعيم ورفع المخلفات العسكرية، الألغام والشغلات العسكرية وتنظيف الموقع. حاليا بدايته العمل هسه حاليا في بدايته.
There are several agreements with Aleph organization and also Pennsylvania University, and in cooperation with the staff of University of Mosul for lifting the debris and the military remains, the cleaning processes. They are in processes to start rehabilitate this place and working on it.
حسب ما جاء بقانون الآثار وطرق الصيانة والإعمار، يتطلب التنسيق المشترك وتكليف جهات متخصصة في مجال العمل في الأبنية والمواقع الأثرية ممن تمتلك الخبرات والكفاءات لازم المشاركة في مثل هذه المشاريع ولديها رؤية واضحة في التعامل مع الموروث الحضاري، تضع الدراسة والطريقة المثلى للتعامل مع الأثر من حيث الترميم أو الصيانة أو الحفاظ أو إعادة التأهيل.
According to the Iraqi Antiquities Law Maintenance and Restoration Method, it requires joint coordination and assigning specialized bodies in the field of work in building and archaeological cities, who possesses the expertise and competencies necessary to participate in such projects and have a clear vision in dealing with cultural heritage that sets the study and the best way to deal with the antiquities in terms of restoration, maintenance, preservation, and rehabilitation.
على ضوء هذا تم الدعم والتعاون الدولي. أول تعاون حدث مع الولايات المتحدة بموجب الاتفاقية في إطار العمل الاستراتيجي الموقع 2008، حيث تم تأهيل مرافق العرض في المتحف العراقي في بغداد، حيث تم تأهيل قاعتين في المتحف، تأهيل السطوح، المخازن، أجهزة، تجهيزنا بأجهزة مختبرية، منظومة إطفاء، إنذار، كاميرات وإلى آخره. وتدريب تفضل أستاذ.
تفضل كمل دكتور.
تدريب المختصين في صيانة الآثار في الولايات المتحدة، تأسيس ومساعدة في إدامة معهد الحفاظ على الآثار والتراث في أربيل.
Therefore, there have been international support and cooperation, the cultural heritage cooperation between the United States and Iraq, According to the agreement within the strategic framework signed in 2008, the following were achieved. Rehabilitation of exemption facilities in the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad, according to which the rehabilitation of 2 halls, roofs, stores, laboratory equipment, firefighting equipment, early warning systems, and surveillance cameras. These all were delivered and provided. And also training of specialists of antiquities preservation training the specialists in the antiquities preservation in the United States, and also establishing and helping to maintain the Institute for the Preservation of Antiquities and Heritage in Erbil.
لموقع باب الأثري اللي تم تسجيله بلائحة التراث العالمي، وصيانة وتأهيل بوابة عشتار، وتدعيم المعابد كمعبد نابو شاخاري ومعبد عشتار. وكذلك تم رصد مبالغ لوضع خطة لإكمال بوابة عشتار وصيانة معبد ننماخ. هاي الخطة إن شاء الله تبدأ، تمت المصادقة عليها، وإن شاء الله بشهر نوفمبر تبدي، يعني الشهر القادم إن شاء الله.
Okay, so there is an agreement and there is a plan which is supposed to start on this November, that involved developing a plan for managing the Babylon archaeological site, maintaining and rehabilitating the Ishtar Gate, and strengthening the Nabu Khashkhari and the Ishtar temples. Currently, funds have been allocated and a plan has been drawn up to complete the Ishtar Gate and maintain the temple of Ninmach.
المعابد، بس الصور مع المعابد دكتور. التعاون مع الجانب الإيطالي.
This is the temple, Ishtar temple.
Ishtar temple, معبد نابو شاخاري.
This is Nabu Shakhari temple.
معبد ننماخ.
And this is the Ninmach temple.
التعاون مع الجانب الإيطالي. تم إعادة افتتاح المركز العراقي الإيطالي في بغداد، وعمل جرد عبر الأقمار الصناعية للمواقع الأثرية التي احتلها داعش، وتم إعطائها للتحالف الدولي والطيران العراقي لكي لا يتم قصفها مرة ثانية.
Now we have another cooperation with Italy, which include the reopening of the Iraqi Italian Center in Baghdad, making an inventory for the archaeological sites occupied by ISIS via satellite, and they were given to the international coalition and the Iraqi aviation in order not to be bombed again.
وتم الاتفاق مع منظمة اليوس وبدعم من وزارة الثقافة الإماراتية بالشروع بإعادة تأهيل المنارة الحدباء والجامع النوري. وتم اقتراح 3 حلول للعلم المنارة.
It was also agreed with the UNESCO with the support of United Arab Emirates Ministry of Culture to initiate the rehabilitation of the Hadba Minaret and Nuri Mosque with regard to 3 solutions, and the 3 solutions were proposed for the minaret.
تم اقتراح 3 حلول للمنارة. الحل الأول نقل القاعدة مع القطع الناجية إلى متحف حضاري وبناء منارة بجانبها. الحل الثاني ترميم وتأهيل القاعدة وتدعيمها بدون أي إضافات مع استخدام القطع الناجية المجرودة واستنساخ منارة بجانبها مع القاعدة. ذن الاقتراحين تم رفضهن من الهيئة العامة للآثار ومن الناس المختصين، وتم اقتراح طريقة التأهيل العلاجية اللي هي تأهيل وصيانة القاعدة والمنارة بطبقاتها 7 مع زخارفها مع الدرجة الحزولة في الداخل، ويتم التدعيم واستخدام القطع المجرودة مع الحفاظ على الأجزاء السليمة، ويتم إضافة عناصر البناء الجديدة بحيث تتناغم مع الأصلي ويتم تمييزها حسب المواثيق الدولية وطرق الحفاظ.
So with this regard, 3 solutions were proposed for the minaret. The first one is transferring the base with the surviving objects to a cultural museum and building a minaret next to it. The second solution is restoration, rehabilitation, and consolidation of the base without any addition, with the use of surviving pieces and the reproduction of minaret next to it with the base. These two solutions were rejected, okay, and they decided to go for the third solution, which is the method of rehabilitation or curative. كمل الحل الثالث دكتور.
الحل الثالث تأهيل وصيانة القاعدة والمنارة بطبقاتها السبعة مع زخارفها مع الدرجتين الحلزونيين في الداخل، ويتم التدعيم واستخدام القطع المجرودة مع الحفاظ على الأجزاء السليمة، ويتم إضافة عناصر البناء الجديدة بحيث تتناغم مع الأصلي، ويجب تميزها حسب المواثيق الدولية وطرق الحفاظ.
So rehabilitation and maintenance of the base and the minaret with its 7 layers, with its decoration with the 2 spiral stairs inside, the reinforcement and the use of the pieces, original pieces, are done while preserving the intact parts, and new building elements are added so that they are in harmony with the original, and this is done according to the international conventions and methods of preservation. This process requires studies, structural evaluation.
هذه العملية تحتاج إلى دراسات وتقييم إنشائي وتحليل تربة وتحليل جيوفيزيائي ليتم تحديد طرق الحفاظ والتأهيل. أما بالنسبة لتقوية الأسس، أما بحقن التربة مع بقاء القاعدة أو حقنها مع إزالة القاعدة، هذه الطريقة الثانية مكلفة جدا وتحتاج إلى وقت وتكنولوجيا.
So this process requires studies, structural evaluation, soil analysis, and geophysical analysis in order to define methods of preservation and rehabilitation. As for strengthening the foundation, either injecting the soil with and keeping the base, or injecting the soil with removing the base, this method is very expensive and takes time and technology.
أما بالنسبة للجامع النوري، حيث تم الاتفاق بالمحافظة على خصوصية المسجد الأصلية دون أي تغيير أو إضافة، وتكون التوسعة اللي تم الاتفاق عليها مواكبة للخصوصية الأثرية والتراثية، مع صيانة البيوت التراثية اللي حول الجامع وإدامتها باعتبارها جزء من خصوصية الموقع، حيث تم طرح مسابقة معمارية من قبل اليونسكو حول التوسعة.
As for the Nuri Mosque, it was agreed to preserve the privacy or the individuality of the original mosque without any change or addition, and the expansion will be in line with the archaeological and heritage individuality with the maintenance and preservation of heritage houses as part of the site, because they are considered within the heritage that heritage. And the architectural competition was launched by the UNESCO on this expansion.
بالنسبة للقبة كانت قبل الصيانة مال سنة 1944 كانت مخروطية، لأنه مدينة الموصل مشهورة بالقباب المخروطية. ما وراء 1944 نصف دائرية كانت، فما هسه لحد الآن ما متحددة نوع القبة اللي يكون. بالنسبة للآثاريين رادوها تكون مخروطية، لكنه جميع الأطراف البقية حسب المنظر السابق اللي تفلشت القبة على أساسه بال 2017 فتكون نصف دائرية. المهم هي حتى لو كانت نصف دائرية أو مخروطية، فإذا مخروطية هي أثرية، إذا نصف دائرية هم صار لها 80 سنة فهم تعتبر تراثية.
And there is also some preference among the archaeologists whether to design it in as in the shape it was constructed, like for example semicircle or the old shape. So he said it does not matter as long as it is they rehabilitate it and it is an archaeological site. So this is the importance.
كذلك تم الاتفاق مع منظمة أليف بالتعاون مع صندوق الآثار العالمي ومنظمة سميثسونيا ومتحف اللوفر لتأهيل متحف الموصل الحضاري، حيث يتم العمل يكون جزئين. القطع الأثرية ترمم من قبل المتحف اللوفر، وتأهيل المتحف كبنى تحتية، ووضع خطة للصيانة والتأهيل من قبل منظمة سميثسونيا.
So an agreement was also reached with the LEAF organization in cooperation with the World Monument Fund, the Smithsonian organization, and the Louvre Museum to rehabilitate the Mosul Museum of Civilization, where the artifacts are restored by the Louvre Museum, and the museum is to be rehabilitated, and a plan is drawn up by Smithsonian.
كذلك تأهيل 5 مواقع أثرية اللي هي بيت التتنشي، جامع الرابعية، جامع المصفي، وكنيسة الكلدان، وكنيسة مارتوما، هم من قبل منظمة أليف، حيث تم الاتفاق عليهم لأن الموقعين هنا والمتحف تم توقيع الاتفاق يعني.
Also, there is an agreement also with Alif for rehabilitating 5 sites: Beit el-Tatanchi, Rabia University, Al-Masfi Mosque, Kaldain Church, and the Mar Toma Church. Agreement also, yes. No, sorry.
الاتفاق مع الاتحاد الأوروبي ومنظمة حول تأهيل الأبنية التراثية والأثرية في الموصل والبصرة.
There is another
حيث
agreement
تم
with
تخصيص الاتحاد الأوروبي حول تأهيل الأبنية التراثية والأثرية في الموصل والبصرة.
Okay, another agreement with the European Union and UNESCO regarding the rehabilitation of the heritage and archaeological buildings in Mosul and Basra.
بالنسبة للبصرة البيوت التراثية الشناشيل على البصرة، أما بالنسبة للموصل فتم تحديد مواقع عديدة يتم الاتفاق عليها حسب المبالغ المخصصة.
For Basra, the Shanashid will be rehabilitated, and for the Mosul, there are many places and areas, and that all depends on the fundings and priorities.
تم الاتفاق مع الجامعة الأمريكية في السليمانية وبدعم من منظمة أليف حول تأهيل بوابة تابيرة في موقع عاشور الأثري.
There is an agreement also with the American University in Suleimania with the support of Alif organization regarding the rehabilitation of the Tabira Gate in the archaeological city of Assyria.
ولأننا مقبولون على فصل الشتاء وخطر الأمطار يزيد من احتمال انهيار عقود البوابة، تم الشروع بالعمل وتحضير اللبن والآجر المطلوب للصيانة وقولبته وشيه ورفع الأنقاض ونصب السكلات الحديدية وإكمال الأكتاف التي تحمل عقود البوابة التي تعرضت إلى تفجير قوي جدا، والعمل حاليا في مراحله الأخيرة.
And because the winter is coming, soon the risk of rain increases the likelihood of the gates collapse. Work has begun preparing for maintenance, lifting debris, installing scaffoldings, completing the shoulders that hold the gate, which have been subjected to a very strong explosion. And the work is in the last stages.
بس الصور دكتور التأهيل مال البوابة.
تابيرة.
أي هاي الصور تأهيلها حاليا تقريبا تم الانتهاء من عندها يعني بمراحل أخيرة جدا يعني. أما بالنسبة للعاصمة بغداد وللظرف الاقتصادي الصعب وعدم توفر موازنات استثمارية وتشغيلية بالإضافة إلى جائحة كورونا، لم يتم تأهيل المواقع الأثرية والبيوت التراثية، لكنه تم عمل اتفاقية مع الجانب السعودي لتأهيل الشريط التراثي المطل على نهر دجلة، ويضم القصر العباسي، دار الوالي، قبة السراي، مجلس الوزراء القديم، القشلة، المدرسة المستنصرية، خان مرجان.
With regard to the capital, Baghdad, due to the difficult economic circumstances and the lack of investment and operational budget, in addition to the COVID-19, the archaeological sites and heritage houses have not been rehabilitated, but an agreement has been made with the Saudi Arabia to rehabilitate the heritage strips overlooking the Tigris River and include the following, which include the following sites: Abbasid Palace, Dar al-Wahli, Dome of al-Sarai, the old Prime Minister building, and Al-Qashla site, in addition to the Al-Mustansiriya School and Khan Marjan, for their important and their cultural importance.
ونظرا لأهمية هذه المباني وتنوعها الحضاري لمرورها بفترات زمنية مختلفة، بدءا بالآثارية فترة العصر العباسي، مرورا بالفترة العثمانية لحين الاحتلال البريطاني، ثم الفترة لحين الفترة، وهذه تعتبر ضمن الفترة التراثية لحين نشوء الدولة العراقية. بحيث هذا التنوع ملحوظ يمكن للزائر أن يفهم التباين الحاصل في الفترات الزمنية وتنوعها العمراني بحسب الفترات الزمنية مع كل وظيفة شيد لأجلها المبنى.
For the importance of these buildings and their cultural diversity as they pass through different periods of time, starting within the Abbasid period, through the Ottoman period, until the British occupation, until the emergence of Iraqi state. Visitors or tourists can understand the variation in the time periods. Its urban diversity is arranged according to time periods, which with each job for which the building was constructed. We can see the existing building in Al-Mutanabbi Street and the Medine with the governmental characteristics dating back to Ottoman era, such as the old government office, Al-Qashla, and the governor. They are all built in a close period between 100 and 200 years. As well as, yes, Doctor.
كذلك المباني اللي تمتاز بعناصرها الزخرفية والمعمارية التي بنيت في العصر العباسي مثل القصر العباسي والمدرسة المستنصرية، وكذلك البيوت البغدادية اللي تمتاز بالشناشير والسقوف الخشبية المميزة.
Yes, besides the building which are characterized by its decorative and architectural elements that were built in the Abbasid era, such as the Abbasid Palace and the Mustansiriya School, as well as the Baghdad houses. Also, the old ones have wooden ceilings.
هذه الأبنية مهددة للعوامل الجوية، الأمطار، الرياح، الرطوبة، ارتفاع مناسيب المياه الجوفية، كذلك المياه السطحية والتجاوزات الغير قانونية. لذا يعني حاليا تم عمل صيانة وقائية ضمن التخصيصات المتاحة، حيث تم إجراء صيانة وقائية لخان مرجان من المواقع الأثرية الشاخصة في بغداد، إضافة إلى شكله المعماري المتميز. وتضمنت الأعمال معالجة المياه السطحية فقط حسب المبالغ المخصصة، والتي تعتبر المشكلة الرئيسية التي لا يزال يواجهها المبنى، إضافة إلى معالجة الرطوبة في الجدران والأرضيات في الطابقين والتي أثرت على العقود والأفاريز.
These buildings are threatened by their humidity and their exposure to weather factors like rain, wind, humidity, and increasing groundwater, as well as surface water and illegal accesses. Therefore, preventive maintenance will be done within the available allocations, money or funding allocations, where preventive maintenance of Khan Marjan was carried out because of its importance. Also, the treatment works included surface water treatment, which is considered the main problem that the building is still facing nowadays. In addition to treating the moisture, the humidity in walls and floors on two floors, and this is in regard to the Khan Marjan, which has affected the walls to a great extent.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayad, and a really very informative presentation that really encompasses both the administrative issues and legal issues, but also the practical and the technical. And it's coming from the ground, so it's very important for all of us who are out of Iraq to have a feel of the reality on the ground. I would like to open the floor for questions and discussions. So if you like to write questions in the chat box so that we can ask the two presenters to answer them. Thank you.
So basically, spices for sheep. Well, why did you ask someone to open this? I mean, it looks better in the box than the mini graduation stuff. And also,
Wajdan Majid asking why can't we ask on the mic? I don't know. You can go ahead. I guess this is how it was organized all the time, but I don't see a problem in asking through the mic if you wish.
Okay, can I speak, please? Hi, everyone. My name is Wajdan Majid. I'm an archaeological scientist from the UK. I studied archaeology in the UK from scratch. I had no background in archaeology. And so I went through all the stages as an archaeologist in the UK, go through. Heritage and historical building in the UK are recorded brick by brick. They are painted, they are given numbers, they are registered. Those who studied in the UK they know very well. I mean, Iraqi archaeologists who came to do their PhD or their masters in the UK, they might know this. The Hadrian Wall, for example, from sea to sea, it's registered brick by brick and giving numbers. This is done by us, students of archaeology. They take us out to site to do this. So my question is, why can't like the cities be divided into grids and the university, first year university students go register them? And because they are just starting, so they wouldn't know anything about like real conservation. And university student year 2 can go and draw them and plan them. And then the proper archaeologists, the graduate, go and conserve them and get their specialized. This will save the government lots of money. My question is to Dr. Giovanni. I worked with the Iraqi archaeologists in 2003, right after the invasion of Iraq. And I worked with Professor Gitano. I'm sure you know him. You mentioned international organization and UNESCO funds, which was given. And in the last lecture, I heard somebody say it did not materialize on the ground, especially for Hadba. Half of it, more than half of it gone missing. My question is, why can't you, for example, you work with the UNESCO or you have worked with the UNESCO or you have contact, why don't international organization give the money stage by stage? As the first stage finish, we give you money, do the first stage, then you get entitled to the second budget. This way, the money will stay safe. It's designated for Iraq heritage, it's safe with the UNESCO, and also save the money from the corrupted Iraqi government. We all know the Iraqi government is corrupted to the core. So when you give the money, it's going to disappear. I'm so sorry if there are politicians present here. This is something no two people disagree about. It's every day in the news here in the UK. So why can't this happen? This is my question to Dr. Giovanni and to Dr. Ayad. دكتور أياد عزيزي أنت ذكرت أكثر من مرة المساعدات الدولية. طبعا أنا أتفق معك ويعني 100% إحنا بحاجة إلى ملايين مليارات الدولارات لإعادة صيانة وهيكلة، لكن إنه نسد عيوننا ونقعد ننتظر المساعدات الدولية بدون أن نبذل مجهود فردي. إحنا مثلا شارع الرشيد من 2003 الله يخليك يا دكتور إلى 2020، يعني الأزبال همينا لازم نجيب منظمة دولية تعطينا فلوس نشيلها. يعني هذه مو أشياء غريبة عجيبة. مثلا خان مرجان المدرسة المستنصرية قبل 2003 كانت مثل الورد، ياما إحنا رايحين ماكلين أو حفلات عرس بخان مرجان. شنو اللي صار؟ على غفلة من الزمن صار خان مرجان مكان لي يعني صرف الأموال بدون أي جدوى، بدون الحصول على نتيجة. اللي سؤالي الآخر هو ذكرت أكثر من مرة إنه الجامعة الفلانية the Smithsonian, the Louvre, the American University, they're going to help in conservation. Okay, they help in conservation, يساعدونا بالترميم وبالصيانة، لكن إحنا نريد من عندنا آثاريين يتدربون على أساليب وطرق الصيانة الحديثة. هل هذه الاتفاقيات تحتوي ضمنياً مثلاً على إنه كل مرة يروحون 5 من آثاريين يتدربون على صيانة الورق والمخطوطات التراثية، صيانة البوتري، صيانة الزجاج، صيانة الآرت وورك، الزخارف؟ وسؤالي الآخر هو إحنا الآثاريين اللي بالخارج شنو مصيرنا؟ إحنا يعني طاقات يعني مهدورة، إحنا نقدر نخدم بلدنا، ليش مذبوبين بالخارج؟ ليش ماكو نداء إلنا؟ يعني هسه الموصل الدكتور جيفاني تكلم بحاجة إلى طاقات هائلة، حتى شيل الطابوق من الأرض لما صارت الأرثكويك إن إيطالي والبزاليكا يعني انهارت، اللي راحوا يشيلون الطابوق من الأرض وينظفونها هم آثاريين، لأن يعرفون الطابوق ونوعه وطريقة الحفاظ عليه وطريقة رفعه من الأرض. حتى هذه الأشياء إحنا نحتاجها. فهذه الأسئلة مالتي اللي أنا محتاجة ردود عليها. فشكرا لوقتكم وإلكم المايك.
شكرا أخت وجدان. أعتقد الدكتور أياد لو تحب ترد أولا, then we will get to Giovanni to give you the floor, but let's first hear Dr. أياد please. بس من فضلك افتح الميكروفون.
الو هسه تسمعني استاذ؟
نعم اسمعك تفضل.
الو
ايوه نسمعك تفضل.
شكرا ست وجدان. يعني انا صحيح بنأكد لك على المساعدات الدوليه، انا مثلك اخلي ايدي بيدك وما مقتنع بها نهائيا، يعني مو ما مقتنع بالمساعدات وانما مقتنع لانه نعتمد على غيرنا بالصيانات، لكنه ايش يسوي؟ وضع بلد وضع اقتصادي جدا سيء، يعني بحيث احنا هسه من تقولي لي يعني خان مرجان اللي حكيتي عليه، انا ما يعني قبلي كان ما حد 3 صيانه صار له 10 سنين. المواقع البقيه في اي تخصيصات ماليه ست ضمن الموازنات الاستثماريه ماكو، فاضطرنا للتعاون مع المنظمات بحيث تعمل مع كوادرنا، مع يعني هسه الجهد القطع وفرسها والتدعيم بالجامع النوري، جماعتنا الكادر اللي هناك موجود باشرافنا دا يعملون يعني عمل كلش ممتاز وياهم، فالتدريب يكون وياهم. لكنه هذا الوضع يعني احنا ما اقول لك يعني وضع البلد وضع الاقتصادي، فلذلك نتجه للمنظمات الدوليه، يعني ما عندنا لا حول ولا قوه يعني. والا احنا بودنا بالنسبه لكم والله يا ريت ست اذا نحب نتواصل وياكم ونستفاد من خبراتكم يا ريت، يعني هذا هذا انا يعني نشجعه ويا ريت نكون تواصل بيناتنا، نتبادل الخبرات ونستفاد من عندكم ومن خبرتكم هناك بالخارج. اكيد هي مو وليده الساعه وانما زمن طويل هناك وتشتغلون وهذا. فيعني هاي بالنسبه للمبالغ ما عندنا ست، اي مبالغ ما عندنا، تبقى شغله التنظيفات وشغله التجاوزات يا ستي العزيزه، يعني على امانه بغداد ويا ما نخاطبهم يا ما يعني هيئه الاثار كل التجاوزات مو بكو شغلات مرتبطه بغير جهات، يعني التجاوزات اللي علينا، الانقاض اللي موجوده بالمواقع الاثريه كلها، يعني احنا لا حول مجرد نخبر السلطات الثانيه، يعني احنا ما نشتغل شرطه او وزاره الداخليه على هاي الناس اللي جاي تتجاوز، فست اكو تجاوزات هوايه، اكو تحديات كلش هوايه، وحقيقه اذا ماكو اموال فما نقدر كل شيء نشتغل، يعني قاعدين احنا فبس جاي هم نستفاد احنا من الخبرات الدوليه. والبارحه كان احنا هم كنا حديث قبل ما نحضر بالزوم على طاق كسره، طاق كسره ست راح يوقع يعني، والبارحه هم يعني اتصلنا بمنظمه تاليف على مود يعني لان ماكو اي مبالغ، يعني حضروا ويانا برلمانيين البارحه 2 والوزير موجود، لكنه ماكو اي تخصيصات. شكرا ست.
Shukran, Dr. Ayad. Giovanni, would you like please to respond to Wajdan? Thank you.
Yes, shall I answer Wajdan and also the comments coming on the chat, or we
Yes,
wait?
yes, please. The ones that are directed to you, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Okay, there are two answers to the question related to the funding and why the funding was not requested and given in phases, right? It is the question. The more general question relate to the setup, international setup. You know already now, 3-4 years after the top of the crisis, the Daesh occupation in northern Iraq, that the international donors are already less interested in funding Iraq. They are looking at other areas. I mean, today, really today, there was the announcement of the results of the Alif Foundation projects. And we can see quite clearly that Iraq did not benefit of project as we thought maybe a year or a year and a half ago, considering that the decision taken last week, concerning the made by the Alif board concerning projects all over the world, are related to the evaluation of projects written in March 2020, so more than 6 months ago. So already in 6 months, because of the COVID pandemic and restrictions, the board met several months later, and I think that already you can assess the discrepancy between an urgency that was 6 months ago and what it is today. For instance, in August, there was the explosion in Beirut, in Lebanon, and of course, which is normal, a lot of funding for Alif also were diverted to the Beirut, let's say, crisis after the explosion. So when we addressed the funding 3 years ago, I personally was aware that if we would not tackle the funding immediately, would be this risk of losing a number of funding that would go to other priorities in a year or 2 or 3 years. However, what you say is correct, that receiving a lot of funding in one shot, in one slot, it's also detrimental because the capacity, the absorbance capacity also of UNESCO to absorb 50 or 80, 90 million dollars in few months was not fulfilled. There was not such a capacity. There is also another more peculiar answer to this, to your question, that in the case of the UAE funding, the Emirati funding, I prepared the project for the Nuri Mosque and Al-Hadba Minaret mainly in 2 stages, what we call soft and hard component. I mean, the design, the diagnostics and design and preparation of executive drawings, executive design for restoration. And then with those data in our hands, we could request and raise the funding for the implementation of the intervention. The government of UAE, of Abu Dhabi, replied that they would not guarantee the second phase after the first one. And therefore, they were strongly inviting us to submit one full component. Now, we have here architects in this virtual room, starting from Dr. Hossam, and he knows very well, and all the architects here and other experts know very well that it is impossible to formulate a project with a budget without having the necessary study done beforehand, right? So the scientific approach would be to request the funding for the study, diagnostics, and the design, restoration design, and then asking for the budget. This was not possible. That's why there was this figure, a bit, if you want, abstract figure of $50 million that was asked to the Emirati government, and they gave to UNESCO in one shot, with all the bad and good points of this. Going back to the other questions, the question raised by Mihyar in writing about specific policies, well, this will, I will skip for the time being, because this would entail maybe an hour or more of discussion, but we tried to highlight a number of policies, a number of remedies that could be implemented. In my opinion, just to make a very, very short answer to this question, it would be enough or important enough to choose, let's say, three, a small number, 3, 4, 5 priorities, and implement those priorities in terms of policies, interventions, and other actions. Because unfortunately, in Iraq, the priorities or the needs are vast, are very numerous. And we all know that if I make a list of 50 priorities, probably I will not be able to implement any of them. So my suggestion would to stick to 3, 4, 5 maximum priorities and trying to focus on this, and then maybe another set of 5 could be implemented later on. Then let me go back to another question, which was talking about the local community, why I didn't mention this in the key challenges. Well, actually, I spoke about it. I talked verbally about the importance of local community, so maybe I didn't see this as a key challenge. Of course, it's a key challenge. It's not as important as other challenges, but of course, the local community has been always in our priority list, in our not even more than that. I mean, I feel that without involvement of local community, there is no chance to have any intervention carried out. And the history of Iraq is telling this. I think the recent history of Iraq is telling this, because the community is easily taken to a bad pathway. They will destroy again. They will be joining extremist groups if there is no full involvement and participation of the local community. And let me go now to the last question, which I think is quite very important. It was raised by I forgot the name here, but by Caroline Sanders. Well, I mentioned this also in my presentation. Why the focus on single monuments, buildings, and not on wider area? Well, I displayed an image with 3 stripes of the urban fabric of Mosul, before destruction, after destruction, and a cartography, a drawing made by my team at the time. Again, I fully agree with you, Caroline, about this. I have been warning UNESCO and other stakeholders of the risk of having what we call in Italian a cathedral in the desert, to have the Nuri Mosque and Hadba minaret fully restored and refurbished in a scientific manner, hopefully according to international standards, and the urban fabric where people reside, where people live, the commercial areas, the commercial streets of Mosul, the schools, etc., neglected. Actually, we tried also at the time to look at these aspects. That's why there is a Japanese project that is looking at the school rehabilitation. There were other projects that the European project also mentioned by the other speaker about Mosul and Basra rehabilitation, which also is looking at the urban fabric as such. Again, sometimes the donors, well, let's say often the donors prefer to invest their money in something more visible, more iconic, that can be known by everyone. Of course, that Nuri Mosque is a symbol for the city. So if I put my money in that building, everyone will talk about it. If I put my money in 3 houses of 3 gentlemen or families or people of Mosul, will be much less visible. And this is one of the problems of the international projects. To conclude, I would like to say that this issue of the dependence of international donations, Dr. Ayad mentioned the Saudi interest in supporting interventions in Mosul and in Baghdad and other international donors. I mentioned Alif, the Tutunji House, also supported by Alif with the Penn State University, etc. Well, I think that, and I'm going back also to Mihyar's key question about the policies. I think the first step, the first point that the Iraqi government should pursue is to try to depend less and less from external support and donations, and try to look at their own capacity for investments. We don't have to forget that Iraq is the 4th producers of oil in the world, and maybe trying to secure laws and to create laws or bylaws that might secure a percentage, which can be a minimal percentage of the revenue of the oil system, of the oil production, to heritage conservation. This would create a stability, less dependence on external factors, but especially the very important issue that it would be the Iraqi government and hopefully the Iraqi people to write the agenda and not other players in the international chessboard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giovanni. I think I don't see other questions. May I just abuse my place as the coordinator or the chair and ask, or maybe just put on the table a premise, and I would like to get a reaction from you and from Dr. Iyad. As an Arab professional specialized in the field, I always feel that heritage and its conservation seems to be an elitist issue, that only the elite are interested. And I feel that one reason is that we skip the why. I mean, you had been addressing the what and how, and not the why. The why, we go through it very quickly. And I can understand that in Europe, we have John Ruskin, Viola Leduc, Venice Charter, and so on. And the why is very well serviced, if you like. But it's not the case in modern Arab world. In pre-modern time, we had different way of value system and so on. In modern times, we are basically using the European and Western rationale. Maybe that's one reason why the local communities don't seem to be very proactive and very engaged. And also the national level, when people plan and take decisions, the Iraqis, I'm not very sure if they really have that rationale and to justify that actually money doesn't go, rather than going to feed people and build houses and roads, to go and restore an old building. Allow me to say it in Arabic because I also want Dr. Iyad to respond to this. يا دكتور إياد، أنا بطرح طرح إنه أحد أسباب الإشكالية إنه الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي المادي هو طرح نخبوي، بمعنى إنه من اهتمام النخبة، بينما عامة الشعب لهم هموم أكثر أولوية، وبالتالي نحن دائما المتخصصين مهتمين، ولكن يصعب علينا إشراك المجتمع المحلي، لأن المجتمع المحلي لم يقتنع. احنا أغلب فلسفة الحفاظ ونظرياته قادمة إلينا من الغرب. يعني بدل احنا صعب ان احنا نقول يعني أغلب الأدبيات في هذا المجال هي أدبيات غربية ومواثيق دولية وكتب فلسفية غربية. فما رأيك في هذا الطرح؟ دكتور إياد، تفتح الميكروفون وترد علينا من فضلك؟
نعم أستاذ، تسمعني هسه؟
أيوة تفضل. نعم.
لا، فعلا هي الجهات المختصة هي المهمة بالتراث، لكنه ضرورة إشراك المجتمع، يعني ضروري جدا، لأنه نحتاجهم بهواي امور. يعني مثلا هسه شاركونا هسه بالنقاش مال القبه مال الجامع النوري. فالناس المجتمع صحيح اهتماماتهم مختلفة، والاختصاصات الآثارية والاختصاصات المعمارية هي اللي تهتم بالتراث الثقافي، لكنه أنا معك في هذا الطرح، لكنه هم ضروري نشركهم، ضروري إشراك المجتمعات المحلية. حتى يعني هم صحيح ما مهتمين، لكنه مو كل الناس، أكيد أكو ناس مهتمة بهذا الموضوع، أكيد أكو ناس تحب التراث، تحب الثقافة، تحب الهوية الثقافية، لأن هذا تعرف تراث بلد هذا ويمثله يعني.
شكرا. Giovanni, do you like to respond to this, to what I've said?
You need an answer on that point?
Yeah, or a comment. I mean, it's not really a question.
Well, I agree on the comment. I think it's absolutely agreeable. The point here is really how to how can I say, to refound the whole sector, because as it is now, it is quite clear that it's not supported enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But also, I think, I mean, like when the community has other priorities, I think unless we engage, unless we include these priorities in the conservation and protection plans, it's very difficult to mobilize the community. I mean, like I remember, for example, efforts in Africa when the AIDS was a serious problem, that actually, you know, the combating AIDS was part of the plans for management of some historic sites, so that the community can respond, because living through a very serious crisis, people cannot really you know, put a priority as a cultural priority while they are, you know, their livelihoods is really threatened.
It is true. It is true. The community engagement or participation is very, very challenging. It's very difficult. There are several experiences where the community participation was successful. I personally had the privilege to work on one project when I was in Palestine, which was supported strongly by the local community, but only because there was a threat that was threatening the livelihood, as you just said, and this created a cohesion between the various families and people in the village. It was a small village. It was not a big city. There are many variables, of course. There is the variable of the education. There's the variable of the census. There's a variable of the status. There's a variable of the geographical distribution, city residents versus villagers or rural areas residents, and so forth. And there's so many. There is the religious divide in a way that it creates now a big challenge for the inter-religious reconciliation in Iraq, and many other factors. It is challenging, but I believe that if we do not address this challenge, the restoration of a building, the mosque, the minaret, the church, or a Al-Tutunji house, to use a non-religious building, it would be, how can I say, half result, like a half result, not a result fully, which it doesn't give full justice to the operation. I don't know if I'm clear. So we have the images of the Al-Hadba minaret in front of us now, right? So we restored this piece of architecture, this building. It's a brickwork, an amazing brickwork from the 13th century, 12th century. And then if the people are not participating in this operation, I think there is a very bitter sense of the entire work. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. There is also a comment I see about starting with kids. And I think I totally agree. And maybe one thing that should be really considered is, you know, as part of these important reconstruction projects and conservation projects, is maybe to create some material for the kids to actually understand and, you know, recognize the value of heritage and its vulnerability and the need for it to be treated with care. I think that's not, I mean, of course, the curriculum of schools need to address that, but also out of the curriculum, I think there is a need also, maybe some projects. I'm aware of a project in Sudan, for example, with a friend of mine, Tumomi. She is an archaeologist in Sudan, in Nubia, and she produced a children's story on the site that she was working on. That actually evolved from her discussions with the local community about their stories on that site. So I think also, because we need to consider the sustainability. We already know that some of these sites had been damaged so many times. I mean, like Ayad mentions the Khan Marjan and how it is, and the Tatanji house, and many of these that were actually restored and then damaged again. And either in some cases, it's not the bombing, it is basically the encroachments and the carelessness and the vandalism, which will actually show that there is a serious problem of awareness and ownership, that the community actually feels to own their heritage, and that this is not belonging to all these outsiders who come and are so interested, and then they go, and it seems that once they go, then things go bad again.
You touched upon very important points. I mean, the education, the children and youth, the awareness, the sense of belonging, sustainability, etc. All these are, of course, very important things. I repeat myself by saying that although the list of priority is long, probably the Iraqi government should, and the Iraqi people, communities should focus on a limited number, because the risk is that we will list, let's say, 20 bullet points, a list of 20 bullet points, and nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. It would be better to list 3 out of these 20 and make those 3 happening, make those 3 implementing, and then move to the next 3. And then to the next 3 or 4 or 5. But let's try to concentrate and focus, because my experience is telling that it's bigger than our capacities. And when I say our, I mean the scientific community, the academia, the local authorities, the government. It's even bigger than us to address all these challenging in one time. So it's better to face them and to see what is more important. Certainly, I agree that the education starting from children, from the elementary school, it is also one of the key priorities, very, very important, because this needs time, but it is the only thing that may have a long-term sustainability in terms of changing the mentality, changing the approach to heritage in a given country. Someone was talking about Italy before, I think, about the approach we have in Italy, Venice Charter, etc. Maybe it was you, Dr. Hossam. And yes, but I'm Italian, and I remember I was a child, really. I was really a little child. I remember quite well when we started a discussion about the preservation of historic towns. It was in the 1970s, because until 1970s, the Italian historic towns were treated exactly as Iraqi towns today. There was no difference. We started in the late 60s, early 70s, I would say from 67, 68 until, and then a lot in the 70s. I was really a child, a little child. But my father was quite involved in these things, although he was a lawyer, not an actor, but he was very sensitive to these things. And I grew up with this type of notions and discussion in my house. So I remember since early childhood, it took at least one generation, at least 20, 25 years, until more or less everyone in Italy was aware of this importance. It was not something that we did in a year or 2 or 3. So forget about it. It's not the duration of a government, of a prime minister, a government, or a minister of culture that will ensure this sustainability. We are talking about 3, 4, 5 different cabinets, maybe in Iraq even more than this number. We share, like Italy, in Italy we have as an average 1 prime minister every year in our history in the Republic after the Second World War. Very short governments. So maybe more than 6, 7, 8 governments, cabinets to ensure this. But you need to guarantee that each of them, although they change, should keep this in the agenda. Because if one cabinet keeps in the agenda and the following one ignores the same agenda, you go back to square one every time. And this is not conducive, of course. So there are, very severe challenges ahead, I know. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop struggling to have a better awareness and a better legislation, and better politicians more aware of this, better civil society more aware of these issues, etc., etc. And again, the funding. I repeat myself. Oil, Iraqi oil. Instead of going to form new militias every month, could be invested also for heritage. This would be much more long-term and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody raised the question of media, the role of media. And of course, I think we all agree.
Very important.
Yes. I have just another question, if I may, before we come to a close. And that's to do also for you, Giovanni, because with your experience with UNESCO, with the historic urban landscape recommendation that is encouraged by UNESCO. How do you see it relevant in the Mosul, for example, where you are involved on the scale of a city, or is it?
Yes, absolutely, yes. I had the privilege to be in the first meeting about historic urban landscape in 2005. It was done in Jerusalem, that meeting, and I definitely agree that it should be considered. Unfortunately, the historic urban landscape process is not right now followed up by UNESCO as it was a few years ago. It has been a bit put aside by the current senior management. They are focusing more on reconstruction, emergency, conflict, using different type of more, say, quicker interventions. The historic urban landscape approach is an approach which requires, as you know very well, being an experienced specialist in this field, which requires time. It's an exercise that requires duration, requires planning, requires consultation. But certainly it is in the background, even in the current UNESCO intervention in Mosul, because the revived spirit of Mosul is talking about historic urban landscape, in one word. Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the time we have reached the time that we are given for this webinar. I would like to thank you so much. And of course, Dr. Ayad, shukran jazilan, and all the participants, all those who attended this webinar, and those who asked questions. And really, it had been a pleasure to have this discussion. And I hope that that we do other webinars on the subject, and hopefully we at the time will be in a better place with this subject. So thank you very much. And
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا جزيلا.
مع سلامة الله. سلام
مع
عليكم.
السلامة. مع السلامة. مع السلامة.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.